Same old man. Game over. Johnny.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
So serious.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the In Session Film Podcast.
Welcome to this podcast review for March 10th, 2026, and I'm Jada Duran.
And I'm Megan Kearns.
Thanks for joining us, everybody, for this conversation. Very much looking forward to jumping into this. Before we do, it is March 10th, as I noted, so I want to say happy birthday to my mother, who celebrates birthday today. So that's very exciting.
Happy birthday, JD's mom.
Thank you. Wish I could be home. I know the fam's getting together over the weekend. I cannot be there because the weekend also happens to correlate to my son's third birthday, which is happening this Sunday, which is very exciting. Very exciting.
Birthday. That is exciting.
It is great. So we'll be celebrating my son's birthday in the morning and afternoon, and then in the evening, there's this little event called the Oscars that's taking place.
You know, just
Sunday,
that little event.
just that whole thing.
Yeah.
A film that probably will not be nominated for the Oscars is Maggie Gyllenhaal's latest film, The Bride, which we are here to talk about. And boy, oh boy, the conversation surrounding this film has been quite all over the place. To say that it's been polarized, I don't know if that's doing it justice. It also didn't have the greatest of weekends at the box office either, unfortunately. But, you know, I was very much willing to put it out there that I think it's a great thing that Warner Brothers gave Maggie Gyllenhaal $90 million to make this movie. And I still hold to that. Some people might disagree, but giving $90 million to a director such as Maggie Gyllenhaal, and knowing what this film was going to be, surely Warner Brothers had some sort of an idea of what she was going to do. And they greenlit it anyway. And I say good on them for doing so.
Yes.
You know, and they've done this a couple of times, right? Like we mentioned on the main show this last weekend that the blueprint for The Bride was very akin to Mickey 17. Warner Brothers gave Bong Joon-ho all that money knowing what that film was likely going to be. And that budget, I'm fairly certain, was even larger than 90 million. And then that film had its issues. They pushed that back. I know another year as well, as we saw with The Bride as well, because this was originally slated to come out last year. And then it gets pushed to March of 2026. So here we are. And I guess before we get into it, what are your thoughts on Maggie Gyllenhaal? What do you think about her movies?
I like her as an actor, and I was not a huge fan, sadly, of The Lost Daughter. I think it's fine, but as an I always love when actors become directors, even if I don't like the films that they make, and especially women directors. I'm always excited for that. Always excited when their films get greenlit. But as an actor, I think she's great. I think she chooses an interesting array of roles, and she chooses big budget films, superhero films. She chooses small indies. So I really like the types of roles that she chooses. And so I was very excited for The Bride, especially because I love the Frankenstein story and it's heavy of adaptations. So
yeah. I've always enjoyed Maggie Gyllenhaal as an actress as well. I have not seen The Lost Daughter since it came out in 2021. I want to say maybe 2022, early on in the decade. I was a pretty big fan of it at the time. I have not seen the film since it came out, but on that first go around, I thought it was a pretty good directorial debut. And while I love Olivia Colman, I thought Jessie Buckley stole the show with that film. I thought she was absolutely incredible. And to see them pair up for this film certainly did not surprise me. I thought they were a great duo on that first go around. And now coming off the heels of what we've seen with Jessie Buckley over the last year or so, man, she is really rolling. And
Hmm.
we'll talk about it. I don't even know how to articulate her performance here, but it's something. It is something.
Hmm.
And of course, like, we've seen so many Frankenstein type movies over the years, and for the reasons we'll get into, and again, going back to the idea of Warner Brothers giving Maggie Gyllenhaal all that money, I can understand why they would, because this is a bit of a unique approach
Hmm.
to that material. Is it pandering to a formula Warner Brothers is familiar with? Maybe. And again, I think that's up for debate as well. But we'll get into it. I guess I will lay that out there. That's the teaser. That's my teaser. So without further ado, are you ready to jump into The Bride?
I'm ready.
All right, let's talk about this one. The Bride is written and directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal. It stars Jessie Buckley, Christian Bale, Peter Sarsgaard, Annette Bening, Jake Gyllenhaal, Penelope Cruz, and others that come and go throughout the film. If you're not familiar with The Bride, in 1930 Chicago, Frankenstein asked a mad scientist to help create a companion. They give life to a murdered woman as the bride, sparking romance, police interest, and radical social change. All right, Megan, as the Frankenstein expert among the two of us and the horror aficionado, what did you think about The Bride?
So I have conflicted feelings about this because there's so much that I like about this.
Mhm.
I'm so glad you kicked things off kind of talking about Jessie Buckley, because what a year and a half, what
Uh-huh.
a 2 years she's been having.
Yeah.
And I love her performance in this. I think she is incredibly chaotic, unhinged
Mhm.
in the best possible way.
Yeah.
I love it. She is fully committed, and there's a lot of depth and a lot of complexity to this performance, which I really appreciate it. But it is over the top in the best possible way.
Mm.
I love the style of this movie. I love the art direction. I love the costuming. I'm obsessed with Jessie Buckley's hair, how it's kind of channeling Elsa
Uh-huh.
Lanchester, as well as I know Babyface was an inspiration, as well
Mm.
as Metropolis was kind of an inspiration too. And I love that. I love the ink stains on her face that are not ink, but they're blood. But I love that kind of look. I love the look. I love the vibe. I love the aesthetics of this. I love how chaotic it
Mm.
is. I love that there's a
Yeah.
musical number in the middle of this. I'm obsessed with that. Like, all of that
Yeah.
is great. It's a very chaotic joyride, and I think that this is a really audacious film. I think Maggie Gyllenhaal's really swinging for it here, which I think is great. And I love that she's taking a lot of risks. I think that's great. Unfortunately, not all of it comes together for me. And I think a big part of it is I've seen this before. And I don't mean
Mm.
the Frankenstein story of it, because there are a multitude of adaptations. Of course, we just had Guillermo del Toro's
Yep.
the end of last year, but which I think is a brilliant masterpiece.
Yep.
Um, but there are so many adaptations there, and I couldn't not be reminded of Penny Dreadful, the TV series, The Bride, the 1985 film with Sting and Jennifer Beal and Clancy Brown, which reminded me so much of this film, or this film reminded
Mm.
me of that. I was reminded of Birds of Prey, and
Sure.
and Harley Quinn, and Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn in that kind of chaotic role. And
Uh-huh.
so much of this, I'm like, I've seen this before. I've seen this particular story told like very similarly. And I feel that this is trying to be a very revelatory and innovative film. And I feel, for me personally, I'm like, I've seen this before, so it doesn't feel as revelatory and innovative as it perhaps could have. And I kind of wish it had dug more into the social justice aspect of it, because it very clearly is hinging on feminism and the literal silencing of women and violence against women and women fighting back and banding together. And that's all great. I love that. I just wish it had dealt more into that rather than being a Bonnie and Clyde romance, because especially considering that The Bride of Frankenstein is not a romance, even though you will see lots of people like dress up in costume as Frankenstein's creature and the bride.
Yeah.
It's not a romance. She
Yeah.
literally is like, the only thing she utters is her disdain for wanting to be a consort.
Yeah.
So anyway, I loved a lot of this, and I liked this. It's not like I disliked this. I think this is a good film, and I actually like that it doesn't completely work for me. I like that it's
Yeah.
divisive. We need more weird films. We need more films that are taking chances, even if it doesn't completely come together.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's just parts that don't quite gel for me because, for all the reasons I've said.
Yeah. This is an ambitious mess. That's
Yes.
maybe the best way I can articulate it. It is quite the ambitious mess. It is narratively disjointed. It is performatively outlandish, thematically uneven, tonally, it's all over the place. So naturally, I kind of loved it. I did have a great time. I really did. On one hand, it almost sounds like a parody. Mary Shelley's ghost travels through time and possesses a woman who falls in love with the fictional character she created in her novels. But the story unfolds in gangster era Chicago instead of Europe in the 18th century, just as we all imagined. Of course, on top of that, Frankenstein is so lonely and horny that it's making him physically ill. So he finds a scientist and asks her to resurrect a Harley Quinn-esque companion, to your point, who is sometimes possessed by the aforementioned ghost of Mary Shelley, who then go off on this Bonnie and Clyde adventure across the Midwest as they're chased by the police, all while Frankenstein, amidst his depression, goes to the cinema and obsessively watches movies featuring an actor he's fallen in love with as a coping mechanism. There's one scene where he has a legit panic attack, and he, along with the titular bride, go to the movies just to calm the hell down. And honestly, I've never related more to a character in my entire life. Not to mention, this film randomly, and you noted this wonderfully in your opening thoughts there, it breaks out into a musical during the dance hall sequence.
Yes.
And honestly, I don't know if it works here. It probably doesn't. It kind of comes from a completely different movie, but I was totally hypnotized by it. This film is bonkers. It is absolutely wild. It doesn't sound like a real movie when you put it like that. And depending on who you ask, it might not be a real movie. Admittedly, it is completely ridiculous. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't enthralled by what was happening from moment to moment. I wasn't exactly sure what we were watching or where it was going to go next. And then on the other hand, and you noted this wonderfully in your opening thoughts as well, it's obviously not meant to be taken literally. It's all operating on a symbolic plane where Mary Shelley is the embodiment of female collective consciousness and urges Ida to reclaim agency over her life, denoting the idea that you are your own person. Ida's transformation into the bride is all about rejecting the notion that she exists purely for someone else, even at the cost of refusing her lover. Now, are those ideas seamless in execution? Nope. Absolutely not. Again, it is very, very messy. There's no doubt about that. But I think those ideas are cogent enough. And when you couple it with all of the crazy antics of the plotting here and the storytelling, I just found it beguiling. It doesn't work. And it might not be innovative. And I do agree with you. The film is less concerned with invention, and it's more about pulling its resources and its inspirations into a pot, and we're just digging through the pot, and we're just throwing it all at the screen, and we're just going to see what happens.
See what sticks or doesn't.
And so, yes, a lot of what you see here is familiar, but it's rearranged in a different and unique way that while familiar, it's also staggeringly unique simultaneously. That was kind of my experience with it. So despite how all over the place it is, and it is very all over the place, man, I was there kind of enthralled.
I love that.
Yeah,
I
I
love that you
enjoyed
were
it.
so mesmerized. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. This is an enjoyable film. But that is the thing. I feel like you have to surrender to it. And I feel like within the first 5 or 10 minutes, you're going to know whether you're in or not.
Yeah.
But I feel like you have to be, and I would argue you have to be open minded anytime you watch a film. But I feel like this film in particular, you must be open minded and just kind of surrender to its
Yeah.
vision, to its
Exactly.
style, to its
Yeah.
rhythm. Yeah, and it is very much stylistically doing its own thing, which I really
Yeah.
appreciate.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Like, and to your point about the film's aesthetics here, I do really appreciate the makeup and hairstyling here, the costuming, the gangster, the gangster era Chicago, which I would
Yeah.
have never have associated with Frankenstein and the Bride. At least traditionally, you don't. But it's such an interesting combo simultaneously, and how those mechanics fuse with its Bonnie and Clyde sensibilities, and then ultimately to its themes here on loneliness and desire.
Hmm.
Again, I don't know how else to articulate, and I'll probably just repeat it a gazillion times in this review, so I apologize in advance. It is incredibly disjointed, but I did find those machinations, as weird as they are, kind of arresting. I mean,
Yeah.
when you look at it from Frankenstein's perspective and also the Bride. Now, they both have different arcs here. They both channel loneliness and desire, but in different ways. And we've already somewhat talked about them both here, but I just really love that from Frankenstein's perspective, he really is just a creature who is desperate for connection, to the point where he's going to manufacture this bride. And by doing so, that comes with its own cost that the film does delve into later on. But it's interesting how that cross-sects with his possible bisexual sensibilities as it relates to the Jake Gyllenhaal character and that whole sequence, and how it spawns into this dance sequence. Again, it's weird. It's extremely weird, but I found it spellbinding. And there's something about Bale's performance as well that just simply brings a tenderness to it. Like he wants that companionship. And I love how he also, when he doesn't have it, he simply copes by going to the movies. And look, as cinephiles, and if you're listening and watching to this, you love movies to some degree. And we can all relate with that. If I have a panic attack, I'm going to the movies. Absolutely. And I love the simplicity of that. Like, it's incredible. And I love that early on in the film, like before he connects with the bride, he's just going to the movies by himself, which is what I
Yeah.
do all the time.
Me too.
All
It's the greatest.
It's the best. So I
It's my favorite
totally
thing.
understand. I love that little moment where he's dancing and he's doing the whole routine, as if no one else is in the theater.
Right.
It's not until someone calls him out and tells him to shh and be quiet that he's like, oh yeah, I forgot there's other people around. Again, totally relatable. But even once the bride enters the frame, he wants her to experience that same joy and takes
Yes.
her everywhere they go. They have to find a movie theater. And I just love that. And I love that. And I think it connects wonderfully, maybe not wonderfully, but it certainly connects to the bride's arc as well.
Yes.
Her reclaiming that agency. Those two things do tether. Despite how disjointed it is, there's still, again, a cogency to it that makes sense despite how messy it is. And again, despite that messiness, I was still intrigued by at least the tenderness that Maggie Gyllenhaal gives to it. That I did find sincere, and I very much did appreciate it.
Yeah, I love so much about what you're saying as far as Frank being really really transfixed
Yeah.
and soothed by movies, and that's his comfort zone, and that's his safety spot, and that's and
Yeah.
on their crime spree road trip, they always that's how the detectives are able to find them because they always are finding a movie theater.
Exactly.
And the fact that, and you're right, that he shares
Yeah.
his love, with the bride, that's great. What I'm thinking about is how with and you're right, they do have two different arcs, but the way the bride is resuscitated, physically she's resuscitated by Annette Bening's character as a
Yes.
scientist, but emotionally with agency, she is resuscitated by the ghost of Mary Shelley, who's
Yeah.
also played by Jessie Buckley.
Yeah.
And
Crazy.
this kind of strange possession film. But I
Yeah.
love that in both cases, for Frank, it's movies, and sometimes he sees himself up on screen and he loses himself in movies.
Yes.
But for him,
Yes.
art is what soothes him, art is what inspires him. And
Yeah.
for the bride, it's art too. It's Mary Shelley, it's her words, it's her ideas, and that inspires her to go along and to stand up for herself and to really embrace what it is she doesn't want or does want. And like I love that throughout the film she says, "I'd prefer not." And like
Yeah.
that's her line in the sand, that's her no. But both of them are inspired by art in very different ways. One by literature, kind of through ghost possession, and one through movies. And I think that that
Mm.
really speaks to the power of art and how art moves us and
Yeah.
how art inspires us to be better in
Yeah.
our lives and
Mm.
so on and so forth.
Absolutely. And perhaps you can help articulate this for me a little bit further as well. But I do love the bride as a mechanism for the film's ideas. And again, I understand it's not seamless, but just broadly speaking, the idea that the film is aiming for here as it relates to female autonomy, because, and as you noted, in terms of Frankenstein mythology, the bride originally is essentially just a prop. She doesn't have much agency. So it's an interesting character to choose as a mechanism here for that agency and gaining a voice, and how that comes about, especially through that relationship. And I think maybe that's what I do appreciate about the Bonnie and Clyde sensibilities here, because there is a bit of a romance. They're on the run. Again, it could not be more Bonnie and Clyde. The inspirations
Right.
are clear as day. And yet there comes that moment near the end of the film when she has to reject Frank, which I
Mhm.
think is fascinating, especially given Frank's reaction to it, because there's an understanding from his perspective as to why. Like he accepts it. And she obviously knows that that's the leap she has to make. And how Mary Shelley, as the ghost, kind of channeling this and provoking this in the bride throughout the film. I sometimes it's a bit on the nose or perhaps
Mhm.
obvious in what it's trying to do there, but I still find the fundamental idea of taking that character and trying to implement the themes through that, coupled with Buckley's incredibly magnetic and ardent performance.
Mhm.
I was captivated. Again, it probably could have been handled better, or examined further. Um, but there is something stimulating about it here, I think.
Oh, for sure. Jessie Buckley is great. I feel I don't want to say there's no denying it, but who knows? Maybe somebody is not a Jessie Buckley fan, but I don't know who
Yeah.
those people are because
I
she's
mean,
great.
it's
Um,
extremely over the top. So I
yes.
guess it depends on how.
I guess that's true.
how
Like
much,
if you're more of a fan of a subtle acting performance, yeah, this
yeah.
might not be for you. But I think it's great. I think it's a full throttle performance, and I am
Yeah.
really a fan of that, especially in the way that she channels and exudes rage. I wish there was more
Yes.
rage because
Yeah.
I much like Anya Taylor-Joy, I am a fan of female rage, and I love seeing it on screen, and so
Yeah.
I'm very excited by that. Thinking about what you said in regards to the Bride of Frankenstein and how she doesn't have a lot of agency. It is true, and it's funny because Maggie Gyllenhaal, I saw an interview with her, and she was talking about that's kind of what sparked the idea for her, is that the whole film is called The Bride of Frankenstein, but she's on screen for like 4 minutes,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and that's it. And so she really is a device, and of course she's not in the novel at all. Like
Yes.
the creature requests her to be made, but Victor Frankenstein destroys her before she's actually animated.
Yeah.
So the Bride of Frankenstein is totally the James Whale film, which is an incredible film. However, there are people, and I might be one of them, who have reclaimed the bride, and the fact that her first action is not one of acquiescence, but it is of, oh no, I do not want this. I don't want this life. And that
Mm.
no is really powerful in such a
Yeah.
simple way. And but I do like that Maggie Gyllenhaal was inspired by the fact that she wanted to give that character more agency and more screen time and kind of tell
Yeah.
a different story. Like, what was she thinking, or what would it look like if her role was expanded? And I do really like that. I think my only thing is that, and I do like I'm kind of torn because I love that her agency is there. And I love that she's inspired by the ghost of Mary I feel I giggle every time I say that because it sounds so funny to me. But I like
Yeah.
that she's inspired by the ghost of Mary Shelley. But I wish we got more of her own agency, although it does come by the end.
Yeah.
But I kind of wrestle with the idea because there is a reclamation there of how the bride in The Bride of Frankenstein is saying no, and she is giving, like, she's very clearly making it known what she wants and doesn't want, so which is a salient point.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what's interesting about the inclusion of Jesse Buckley here, and feel free to correct me if I'm way off base here, but because the bride isn't in the original novel, but with how Mary Shelley is such a significant, like she plays a significant role here as this ghost possessing Ida throughout the film, it has a little bit of that Hamnet, we're reinterpreting mythology here, which I find fascinating given that we're seeing this right off the heels of Hamnet just a few months ago, which was very much doing the same thing with Shakespeare. And again, which is why I go back to, as I noted in my opening thoughts, it's less about interpreting this as a literal adaptation of any sort. It's
Right.
a reimagining, like we saw with Hamnet and Shakespeare, and how he was quote unquote inspired by the death of his son. We don't really know if that was the case. When you watch Hamlet, it certainly doesn't seem like that was the case, but that film was reimagining those events to tell its own story,
Right.
to examine its own themes on art as a coping mechanism. And I feel like there's a lot of that happening here. And ironically, this film thematically also includes a through line on art as a coping mechanism.
Yes.
So again, I just find the coincidence there pretty incredible. And Mary Shelley as this conduit for Ida in terms of that reclamation and how we eventually arrive there. And again, even to the point where she has to refuse Frank in the way that she does at the movie theater, even though it's outdoors, but still at the cinema, like for it to take place there, given what we know about Frank, I think is incredible. And like that whole sequence and how it crystallizes there, I do really quite like. Now, arriving to that point, sure, there's a lot to debate. There's certainly a lot to debate, but I find that fascinating. And I think that's why some of the superficial comparisons I've seen of this to something like Joker, for example, are thinly veiled to me. Like, I understand that might have been somewhat of the blueprint as to why Warner Brothers greenlit this to begin with. Let's have a bit of a Frankenstein female version of Joker. I'm sure that's what they saw in their mind's eye in terms of box office.
Right.
And obviously it didn't return in the same way that Joker did. But I think fundamentally, Maggie Gyllenhaal, maybe she sold it as that to Warner Brothers, to be fair. I don't know. But the final product that we got here, I don't think really has like those comparisons, I think, are extremely superficial. I don't think the two really have anything in common beyond the crime element and central performance that's a bit wacky. That's about as far as it goes, I think.
I completely agree with you. I don't think that there are similarities. And the fact that so many people have said it, and so many people, I feel like and I heard people saying that even before they watched the film. And it is, whether or not it was on her mind when she was making it, it is not a film that Maggie Gyllenhaal has said was an inspiration. And she has said the films that were. She said, obviously, Bonnie and Clyde, Persona, Wild at Heart, like
all
a whole
those
bunch
make
of other,
way more sense.
Top Hat, like a lot of like classic Hollywood films, and not Joker. So, I mean, not that you can't see parallels, of course, but I think it is a wrong comparison. I get it on a superficial level, like you said, but I don't think. I think these are very, very different movies. And just because there's a crime element and it's a reinterpretation of something in a different way, I mean, you could make that comparison with a lot of other films. But I agree with you on so much of what you're saying.
Yeah, and that's why the box office discourse over the weekend made absolutely no sense to me. Joker making a lot of money, especially in hindsight, doesn't really surprise me all that much. It is tethered to one of the most iconic comic book characters of all time.
Right.
That film was always going to make some money. And here, even though Frankenstein has vivid iconography for sure, but it doesn't quite have the same box office draw as freaking Batman. There's a reason that Guillermo del Toro had to make his movie on frickin' Netflix. It probably was difficult to get it into theaters. I mean, I just don't see the comparisons all that, like, again, maybe she pitched it as that or Warner Brothers saw it as that.
Yeah.
But I think people are throwing that out a little too lazily. Those classic movies that we've already referenced that you were just talking about there are way, way more appropriate here. And again, like I do kind of love how they manifest here, as weird as it is. And I am always going to meet the criticisms halfway, because I do think they are very, very apt. I understand that from an execution perspective, it is a bit coarse for sure. But when those influences do manifest, again, those scenes in a vacuum, I do find them hypnotizing, even if on the whole they don't make a whole lot of sense, such as the aforementioned dance hall sequence when it just turns into a musical all of a sudden. In a vacuum, man, I could watch that scene over and over again. It feels like it's from a completely different movie. It really does not belong here. But that 2 minutes, though, I was on the edge of my seat. Like, I was totally with the movie. It's like, man, I really do want a full-on musical of this now. It's great.
I mean, it is. Again, I can't help but compare it to Birds of Prey, because there's a musical number in that too, with Marilyn Monroe, Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend. And many other films have kind of broken into musical, but I'm never mad at that. I love that.
I love a good musical. I'm never going to be angry.
Musical. Right. I love that whimsy. I love that theatricality. I am here for it so much. It is, I have to say though, it did, and you're 100% right, but it broke my heart when you said that Batman is the one that has the cachet at the box office and not Frankenstein, because I'm just like, no, where are the gothic lit fans?
I know. It's not the 1940s anymore, unfortunately. Maybe that will swing the other way in another 10, 15 years. Who knows?
I don't know. I don't think so. But
I don't think so either. Like the way things are trending. Yeah.
No, definitely not. But no, you're absolutely right. And thinking about, Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, and you're absolutely right. It wouldn't have gotten made had Netflix hadn't given him the money for it. So, because it had been shelved at Universal. So, because they wanted to go their dark universe way. So, It
Yeah,
makes me sad.
exactly. Yeah, it is unfortunate. I'm always down for a fun Frankenstein movie. I mean, we've had so many over the decades.
Yeah.
Some of the most recognizable genre movies we've seen relate back to that iconography. We're just not at a point now where it has that same cachet, unfortunately. Which is why I go back to in hindsight, it's crazy that they gave her 90 million for this. I'm
Mhm.
so glad they did, but it does feel a bit against the grain as far as the cultural rhythms that we're living in now in this decade. But I am always going to be here for ambitious failures.
Yes.
I will take a movie like this 1,000 times over the safe mediocrity we typically get from the major studios. And some of
Mhm.
those movies can be great. I'm not trying to necessarily denigrate all of them, but most of what we get from the major studios, they're trying to pander to the four quadrant, so they're often lacking in ambition. And I love that Maggie Gyllenhaal comes here and says, I have about 90 different movies I'm going to reference, and we're going to do it in 2 hours, and we're just going to throw it and see what happens.
Yep.
And it doesn't all work. Again, I don't know how many times I have to say it. I understand. It is very, very messy, but she's making choices, and I appreciate that she's making choices, and she's letting
Mhm.
Jesse Buckley go completely off the rails
Yes.
in a way that's certainly not gonna work for everybody. But I love it. It's like some of the best scenes here performatively, I think, do come down to that rage. There's something about how she channels that anger, because it's not just raw bitterness.
Right.
It is anger provoked at such a deep, profound level that is tender, it's poignant, it is rage that has been brewing for seemingly a long time. Even when we see her in that opening sequence, it
Yes.
seems as if she has been simmering for years,
Yeah.
having seen the worst of the worst, and is just ready to take it out on somebody.
Mhm.
And then to see that come back as the bride, again, to your point earlier, I do wish that the film really wrestled with that further, or let that explode a little bit more. But
Yes.
when when we do see it, Jesse Buckley taps into it in such a great way, because again, it's not just rage on its own. There is something bubbling underneath it, and she gives it such a tender pathos that couples really well with the anger that burst out in those moments as well. I don't know if that's articulating it well, but
I
I
think
found
so.
nuances to it, and I was pretty floored by it.
Yeah. No, I hear what you're saying because as I've said, I love seeing women's rage. I think
Yeah.
rage and anger are like I think rage is a very under expressed and under depicted emotion on screen, and too
Mhm.
often in films when we see women's rage, it's kind of in these stereotypical ways that don't
Mhm.
necessarily feel authentic, nor do they show the scope of rage and the way that it can it be expansive and the spectrum on kind of different iterations of rage. And so, and women are not a monolith, but I will say it's refreshing to see a woman director like Maggie Gyllenhaal tackle rage in this
Yes.
way and to show its complexities. And you're right, Ida, who then becomes the bride, she is very disgusted and dissatisfied with her own life, but clearly disgusted at what she's
Mhm.
seeing around her and seeing the misogyny and violence against women, and women are getting murdered by this mob boss, and they're having their
Mhm.
tongues cut out,
Yeah.
and all of these horrific things, and she's
Mhm.
witnessed to all of this, and she's horrified by it, rightfully so, and scared. And I love that this film is tackling that. And I've seen there have been lots of criticisms and praise I think of something like Greta Gerwig's Barbie, and that how it was kind of feminism 101, and which it was. But what's so terrible about feminism 101? People need that too.
Mhm.
And so,
Mhm.
like, yes, I know we both kind of wish this had dug deeper and wish this had explored that element more. But at the same time, I'm glad for a film like this that at least it is broaching the topic. At least it is addressing the problems with violence against women, and it's maybe not doing it in the most complex way or the most thorough way that it could, but at least it is addressing it. And we really do get to see, so we're seeing it on the macro level, but we're also seeing it on the micro level with the bride and with her character. And yeah, I really really love how Jessie
Mhm.
Buckley depicts rage, and I love that we get to see that here.
I agree. And I think you make a great point about the rudimentary of it all, because we live in a society where Netflix has deliberately told its writers that, hey, you need to overwrite this shit.
Oh,
You need to write as if they're on their
yeah.
phone and doing laundry and not paying attention. So the dialogue comes off as, hey, I'm going to go rob this store over here. Just so you know, I'm going to go do it right now. And it's just,
I weep.
it's
I
so,
weep.
exactly.
Weep for our society.
I know. And if that's the world we live in, I think doing a little bit of 101 is okay. It's
Yeah.
because a lot of people, their mentality, that's where they're at in terms of
Mhm.
digesting art. And, and Barbie, of course, does it in such a fun, inventive way that's
Right.
really great. And I think this film was attempting to do something unique and interesting. Again, it doesn't all come together like Barbie does, but I certainly don't mind that approach. And I will say, I think it's like where this film is at its best in terms of storytelling. I do really love, again, how that anger comes through in Buckley, but also in the storytelling here, because it's the element of this film that isn't holding your hand. Because when Buckley is talking about the things that she's witnessed, we haven't seen it as the audience.
Right.
She
That's
has to
true.
sell us on that. And we feel it in her, again, in that rage as we're talking about. And I love that the film, at least in those moments, is willing to challenge you on that and allow Buckley to carry that emotional fortitude. And then you couple that with that scene with Lupino, the crime boss here, and I forget the character's name. One of them is the John Magaro character as Clyde. But that whole sequence in that cafe, that restaurant, wherever they're having lunch there, is really great, because when we get the close-up shots of Lupino, we see all the tongues there in the background.
Yes. In the jars.
And there might have been a few shots where Maggie Gyllenhaal emphasizes what those are, but it's never told directly to us. It's not like a character in that Netflix kind of way points to him and goes, look at all those tongues back there. He's, man, that's crazy. That's a lot of tongues. Like, that doesn't happen.
No.
So even though she spells it out in the visual language, it's not there verbally. So
Right.
it's not holding your hand as tightly as it could have. And it's letting the cinematic form, right? The visual language tell the story there in a way that cinema can only do. So I do love the storytelling from that perspective, because it gives weight to that anger in the bride when she's talking about how she's seen all of this death and carnage. And then we get that shot of the tongues, and there's 50 jars there on those shelves there. And it's like, oh man, she really has seen a lot.
Yeah.
Which then gives further weight to her choices later on in the film when she does reclaim her own life and garner some of that agency. So like that through line throughout the film, I do think is really great. That should have been more of the nucleus here and really emphasized. Maggie Gyllenhaal, again, she loses sight of that a little bit, because we got to have a Bonnie and Clyde thing, and we got to have a dance sequence, and then we got to have the scenes with my brother. And like, there's all these other things that the film is trying to do that somewhat gets lost. But that element, though, I do think is pretty robust despite all of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I will say, I feel kind of conflicted in the way it's depicted, but at the same time, I feel similarly that I'm glad like that we see, not that we see it, but that sexual assault is also addressed as part of this. So it's
Yeah.
not just the crime boss who is the big bad here as if it's an individual problem, but it's also kind of addressing that this is a systemic problem too, which I think is great because too many
Yeah.
films, when they want to tackle social justice issues, too often they're looking at it as an individualistic problem. It's like, no, this is a system-wide issue. And so I really appreciate that it's doing that. I wish more
Mhm.
deeply, but at least it's addressing it. But
Mhm.
something else that I really love about kind of our conversation about rage and about the bride is I really love that she is a character who is not there to please anyone. She's not there to please a man. She is not, even though it's a love story, she is there for herself, and kind of everything about her rebels, like her appearance, her actions, her possession, by the ghost. Everything
Yeah.
about her is kind of a pushback against society in that I am who I am, I'm going to be who I am, and I don't care if you like it or not. And it's not about appeasing anyone or being pleasing to the eye or to society. It's very much about disruption right from the start
Yeah.
and right from the beginning scenes. And I really, really appreciate
Mhm.
that. And I think that when you connect that to kind of this chaotic, fun energy going on in so much of the film, that feels really refreshing in a way
Yeah.
that I appreciate.
I agree. And I think that's where, again, there's some fascinating nuance with the bride because she doesn't accept Frank immediately, even if she was resurrected for his own purposes. It's not as she just accepts it. Like,
Right,
she does
right.
push back a little bit. She really doesn't embrace him much until there's that moment in the alley where he kills those two men that were groping her there in the club sequence. And then they get on the train and they head off to New York. And there's that endearing moment with the fountain. And then they go to the cinema again, which
Always back to the cinema.
always back to the cinema. And so, like, he has to slowly win her over. In fact, there's one interesting moment when the bride actually comes on to Frank and he isn't even sure about how to uh, be receptive to that.
Yeah.
So like, they're both trying to navigate who they are
Mhm.
and what they are going to mean to each other, which is so fascinating to me. And there's also that element with the bride as well, as she is trying to figure out what her name is. She asks Frank a couple of different times, like, "What do you know about me?"
Mhm.
And he does, his biggest mistake throughout much of the film is leading her on by claiming that he knew her to some degree.
Right.
And of course, that comes to a head near the end of the film in a fascinating way. But like, she's trying to discover who she is. And even when there are these spurts of violence, she is actively opposed to it. Like, she doesn't want to be a
Yes.
monster.
Right.
And she feels immensely guilty over the violence that they do become involved in, which is again like this fascinating thing because on the exterior, on the face, Buckley's performance is so brazen
Yeah.
that again it might carry the aesthetic or the tone of a Frankenstein monster kind of thing, but really underneath it is this extremely vulnerable and raw person who is trying to gain agency. And there's always something trying to take that from her,
Mhm.
whether it be Frank or the scientist early on or the Sarsgaard character and what we learn about him throughout the film as well. Uh, there's always something trying to rip that from her as she's trying to gain that agency. So again, like, I understand the criticisms, but I can't help but be allured by what the film is trying to do there, even if it doesn't all work. I know,
Yeah,
I'm gonna have
right.
to end every sentence with that.
I know every caveat is that,
Yeah.
something that I realized just now as we're talking about this, because I kept thinking after watching this film and throughout our conversation, I keep thinking, is the Peter Sarsgaard Penelope Cruz detective subplot really necessary to this film? And I think you can make an argument either way. But what I will say that I appreciate more now throughout our conversation is that there's a scene early on when you see the two of them working together, and they're talking to some people, and Peter Sarsgaard's character is like, "Oh, that's my secretary," and he keeps calling her a
Yeah.
secretary, and she plays along with it. So that's her way of getting information because she's unassuming. People
Yeah.
don't, she's not seen as threatening, that she's actually a detective. And it's kind of like, ugh, like that's gross. But at the same time, it's like, well, that's what she's doing so she can do her job and so she can get ahead.
Mhm.
But I love that that's happening in a film where Ida, who then becomes the bride, and I love that I don't love that she names herself the bride, but I do love that she gives herself her own name, and it kind of feels superhero-y in a way, and it feels also like a weird nod to Kill Bill, like the bride. I could
Yeah.
not think of that, even though I don't know
Yeah.
if that was intentional. But anyway, but I love that we're getting the parallels where you have Penelope Cruz's character who has to who not has to, but she's playing this game of like, oh, I'm just a meek woman, hee hee hee, and you have the bride who's like, I'm not doing any of that. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not here to please you or to do what you think a woman should do. And I kind of appreciate. So I'm not sure that subplot fully works or is fully necessary. Having said that, I do appreciate that you kind of get that perspective when you also have the bride's perspective of like,
Yeah.
I'm not here to be nice. I'm very much here a rejection of
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I understand the parallel in terms of the Penelope Cruz character also gaining agency in a world and a job where female detectives in the 1930s, especially, it wasn't very common. And the film makes nods to that a couple of different times throughout
Right.
the film. So by the end of the film, when she does gain her own agency, it parallels very much with what we're seeing with the bride. I understand what the film is trying to do there. I agree. I don't think it fully works, and it's certainly not necessary. But at the same time, I think Penelope Cruz is charming here. I think she does a great job of giving credence to it. I think that's certainly more of a writing thing or an editing
Mhm.
thing, because those characters don't show up until what, 35 minutes into the movie, which
Yeah,
is another thing.
at
The
least.
editing
Yeah.
here is admittedly all over the like it's nuts. It's not great. It's not the best in terms of editing. Um, but yeah, I mean, I again, it's one of those things. I understand what it's trying to do. I just don't think it fully works. And I don't like the Jake character, the Sarsgaard character, aside from I guess his little inclusion with the bride with Ida, which comes out of nowhere. Like that
Yeah.
backstory is not something that we as the audience are completely in tune with. And then when it comes to a head, it's not fully articulated either. So there's just a lot of unearned ambiguity there that doesn't quite make sense.
Right, right.
So like I don't know. And then ultimately it serves as a plot mechanism for Myrna to take the badge, so to speak.
Right.
So yeah, it's messy. I mean, I think I've said that once or twice here.
Just a couple times.
It's a little messy. Any thoughts on Jake? On Jake Gyllenhaal?
Oh, on Jake Gyllenhaal,
Yeah.
I was very pleasantly surprised. Not surprised to see him because, of course, they're siblings. But I kind of love that this is a glorified cameo, and
Yeah.
I thought that was great. And I love that he's kind of doing a Fred Astaire type of
Yeah.
role. And yeah, I kind of for it really worked for me.
He's fun. He's
Yeah,
he's really good.
I like him as an actor, and I thought he was great here. So it was a fun performance. It's funny because there are certain things that if I was doing this film, I might have excised, but that is definitely I would not have excised his scenes. I thought they were great.
Yeah, I really liked him a lot as well. And honestly, I think what he brings to the film is far more important than maybe important is the right word, but I think far more effective than the Sarsgaard crew stuff that we just talked about because of how this film functions as art, as a coping mechanism.
Yes.
And going back to Frank and how he idolizes Ronnie. And, because like that scene when they meet up is all kinds of fascinating.
And awkward and
and
cringy,
awkward and weird. Yeah.
and sad and sweet in a weird way. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause like, again, like Frank is like almost like he loves the guy. Like he full on like adores Ronnie. And of course, Ronnie doesn't care at all as this big movie star. But again, like how that eventually crystallizes there is incredible. But yeah, I think that character is really great. And that's the first time they've worked together, Jake and Maggie. They haven't done anything outside of that. This is the first time.
Wow, I don't think I realized that. That's wild.
Pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, I know we've gone on a little long here. Do you have any other thoughts on The Bride?
No, well, I will say, I think I feel like this happens every time we talk. I feel like I enjoy this movie even more now that we've had a conversation about it.
Yeah, same.
Right? Like to really
Yeah.
dig in, to the nitty gritty and dig into some of the themes and the motifs. Yeah. But I mean, I think I love that this is audacious. I love that it's ambitious. I love Jessie Buckley and I love the style of this. And I think, and I love what it's going for, even, if it doesn't all come together. I'm okay. And I agree with you. And I would much, 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 much rather watch a film that is captivating for what it's trying to do and for its style and for its ambition, even if it doesn't all work, rather than some kind of, tedious, middling, boring film. Like I'd rather something be memorable than something be boring, obviously. And so, yeah. So anyway, I enjoyed this, but I enjoy it even more after talking about it now.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm going to be curious to see how this film ages. I could see this being a cult classic in another 20 years.
Yeah.
I think this very much has that written all over it. And I'm excited to see how that manifests over the years. I do think this is going to be one of those movies that people come to love. Despite the box office now and the reviews now, I think this is going to age quite wonderfully. Now, I don't think it'll ever be I don't think like it's going to be one of those movies where people will recognize its flaws but still kind of love it. Maybe kind of in the way that a lot of people see that Crow movie from the 90s. It's like, okay.
Oh, The Crow is great.
Well, okay. It's not, I wouldn't say call it the best movie.
No,
but people love it. And I really like it despite its flaws. Like I guess that's what I'm trying to say. like I don't think people are ever going to come around on this film going, oh my God, this is an editing masterpiece. And the writing here is seamless. Like, I don't think it's going to come around in that regard, but people will just come to love it and recognize that thematic prowess despite the issues, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And again, just going back to what you were saying and what we've echoed already in this conversation, as far as in these fascinating failures, especially when I look at Warner Brothers 2026 slate. So they have The Mummy coming up. They have Mortal Kombat 2. They have Animal Friends, Supergirl. Yep. What else do we have here? Coyote vs. Acme. I'm genuinely excited for that, actually. Practical Magic 2.
Yeah.
What else that we have here? Clayface. The Cat in the Hat. Of course, Dune later on in December.
I'm excited for The Mummy. I'm excited for Dune.
There are some genuinely interesting films here for sure. But there's also quite a few of, okay, like I'm not like dying to see half of the movies that they have listed here. And I'm excited that The Bride is going to be one of those movies that exists among this crop. It at the end of the year, I don't expect it's going to be the best movie of the crop here, but I think it'll be one of those movies that I appreciate much more than most of these.
Yeah, no, totally. I know. And it always does sadden me that, but you're not wrong, but it always saddens me that too often we equate a film's worth based on what it does at the box office or the amount of awards it gets, because there's so many other films that you're right, that just don't find an audience right away, but they do later and they are quirky. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Totally agree. And then my last thought, so you noted about The Bride coming to terms with her name. I did want to ask you, do you think that was foreshadowed pretty heavily early on in the film?
As far as that her name was going to be the bride?
Yeah. And I don't, maybe it's just the presumption that I had given the title of the film.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
what Mary Shelley, like Buckley as Mary Shelley, as the ghost, was, it felt like to me she was heavily suggesting when Ida was confused and uncertain as to who she was, the ghost of Mary Shelley felt like she was very much foreshadowing that this is where this is going to go.
Yeah.
So it always felt like the inevitable conclusion as to where that was going to go at the end. But I guess I just wanted to ask what you thought of that, or if I just had a different experience than you in that regard. I don't know.
No. I think you're right. And I kept struggling with it, thinking like, no. It can't be that. It's got to be something else. But when she says, I don't know what her name is, we're going to wait till she has her own name, which she's going to choose herself. I'm going to call her Ida for now. And so I'm like, she's going to go with the bride. And then I'm like, no, that can't possibly be it. But yeah. So no, I think it's very heavily foreshadowed as well. So I very much agree with you.
Yeah. But you are right. The reveal at the end is very big and very, I'm Darkman now, or whatever. I just pulled that out of the top of my head, but like it does have that kind of comic booky vibe to it for sure.
Which I'm sort of not mad at, but also I don't know. Like, I guess it felt so obvious, but also I guess I'm not mad at it. I don't know. Again, I feel conflicted.
Well, I mean, it is Warner Brothers after all.
That's
They're very much in the comic book superhero business.
Yeah,
so.
That is their milieu. So it totally makes sense.
Yeah, that's probably where the Joker comparisons are most appropriate. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's where people are getting the Joker from. I don't know.
I don't know.
Anyway, The Bride, it is a fascinating failure. I can't really recommend it to anybody, but I enjoyed it for whatever that's worth. The Bride, it is in theaters now. Go watch it. If you agree or disagree with anything we had to say, you can leave a comment below. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can hit us up on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky. You can always email us sessionfilm@gmail.com. Megan, thanks as always. Really do appreciate you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to talk with you.
Of course, as always, where can we find you on social media as well?
You can find me at Opinion S World on Blue Sky and Twitter, and The Opinion S on Instagram and Letterboxd. All
right. Yep. Please go and give Megan a follow. Really, really great follow on social media, and check out all of her great stuff. Really do appreciate it. Our second review this week is Pixar's Hoppers. By the time this episode is released, that episode is probably out already. Brendan and I really go into the weeds on that one.
Ooh.
I don't know if you've had a chance to see Hoppers yet, Megan.
No, not yet. Not yet.
I will just say it's probably, or at least it's among Pixar's most politically involved to date. And I don't think that it necessarily gets its politics right, or at least it's murky. But here's the thing, and I'll be curious to get your thoughts once you do see it. I don't know if I'm involving 2026 too much into it. Like it's
But
one
how
of
can
those
you
things
not,
when,
you know?
like exactly, like I wonder how it's going to play 20 years from now when we're removed from this context.
Yeah.
But when I watch it through the prism of 2026, I think its politics are murky. Maybe not the best, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on it for sure.
All right.
We'll see.
All right. Check it
Don't want
out.
to spoil it. I know you do a spoilers podcast, but I'm not going to spoil it for you. You can check it out and let me know. Anyway, we talk about that. The Main Show this week, episode 678. We talk about the Oscars, of course, that's happening this weekend. And we talk about the things we want to see at the Oscars. We don't do predictions, just we talk about some things we want to see and experience. So go and check that out. Chasing the Gold, that's also out right now as well. Shadon does predictions on her episode this week on Chasing the Gold. New women in session at the end of the week. Okay, with all of that said, thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the In Session Film Podcast.